الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى قيام يوم الدين. القول مني في جميع الأشياء قول آل محمد، فيما أسروا وما أعلنوا وفيما بلغني عنهم وفيما لم يبلغني. أما بعد، فقد قال الله العظيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولي الألباب. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. The discussion for today, insha'Allah, will be one which is important, which is the struggle between science and religion. For many years, and you can backtrack this to almost 400 years, there has been a struggle or a long time debate that can science and religion coexist? Is it possible for these two different pieces of knowledge or trajectories of knowledge to come together? And the reason why it's important today is because we have to understand that atheism has changed from before. The old version of atheism, the way that it would rebuttal against religions, the way that it would fight against religions, the way that it would present the evidence that it had to not believe in a creator, is philosophy. Their ability to reason was the way that they would disprove the existence of God. However, in today's age, the modern atheist, the tool that he uses to fight against believing in God is science. So he will present something like this by saying that science and religion cannot coexist. And that is one of the core beliefs of the atheist. So this argument becomes even more important, and that is why we will discuss it, insha'Allah. We will discuss this argument into three different points. The first point is to look at the history of this argument. The history of this struggle between science and religion. How did that history begin? We see this in the Middle Ages or the Renaissance times, when the church took over after the Roman Empire. After the fall of the Roman Empire, the church took over. And this happened in three different steps. The first step, what the church done, was it established itself as a source of knowledge. Not just a religious source of knowledge, no, but also a scientific source of knowledge. That its scriptures, its point of views, its perspectives are a source of knowledge like any other. That was the first step. The second step is where it becomes dangerous. The second step was that now the church, not only did it establish itself as a source of knowledge, now it established itself as the source of knowledge. Meaning what? Meaning that whatever the church says, whatever theory or idea or piece of knowledge, be it religious or non-religious, that the church supports, anyone who contradicts it is committing a blasphemy, or what they call heresy. So the second step was that the church now is the only source of information, and anyone that contradicts the church is heretical. And one of the examples you have is that the church adopted the idea of geocentrism. What's geocentrism? Geocentrism is the idea that the earth is at the center of the universe. This was an idea that the church accepted and they adopted, and this became doctrine. So this became the only correct view, the only correct theory about the universe was this one, that the earth is at the center of the universe, nothing else. So that is step 2. The third step is even worse. Now, it established itself as the only source of knowledge, and anyone who contradicts it is heretical. Now, anyone who contradicts anything that the church says is to be punished. Whoever contradicts the church in any of their beliefs will be punished. And some of the punishments were severe. So they established an inquisition, which was what? A judicial system, a court, if you will, that investigated any scientist, any philosopher, any thinker, and made sure that his views or his ideas that he was presenting did not contradict their own. And if they caught someone that was contradicting their views or their perspectives, he would go through the court and his punishment will be decided. I'll give you 2 examples. The first example is Galileo Galilei. We've heard this name before. And Galilei, in his time, he had a theory which was opposing to the church, which was what? Heliocentrism, which goes against the church. The church believes that the earth is the center of the universe. Galileo, based off his observations, came to the conclusion that no, the sun is at the center, not the earth. Because of this, what the church done is they forced him, they threatened him, and they forced him to retract this statement, and for him to say that what I said about the sun being at the center was heretical and it was wrong. They placed him under house arrest and they banned him from ever teaching again, just for contradicting one of their views. Another example is even more severe. You have Giordano Bruno. He was also a cosmologist. During that time, he had the idea or the theory that the universe was infinite, or the universe was still expanding, and the stars that we observe in the sky are planets. They are not just stars or light, they are planets. Because of this belief, Bruno was imprisoned for many years. And after his imprisonment, they punished him by death. How did they kill him? They burnt him at the stake. They burnt Bruno alive in Rome. So this summarizes the early beginning of this struggle between science and religion, and how the church treated any person who was providing a view about the universe, about science, whatever it may be, and when it went against them, this is what they done. And this was the birth of this argument. Now, the second point of discussion is, let's look at some of the reasons why other people, or mainly atheists, because these are the people that are mainly carrying this conversation, why they say that science and religion cannot coexist. Inshallah, after a salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. The first reason that they provide is that religion and science contradict each other. That religion relies heavily on blind faith, whereas science needs proof and concrete proof. So these two cannot coexist because one contradicts the other. And the second reason that they provide is that when we look at science and then we look at religion, we see the person who has adopted the scientific thinking cannot possibly be religious. Because religion slows down science. Religion goes against science and it does not encourage science, so it slows down scientific advancement. And the religious man cannot be scientific, and the scientific man cannot possibly be religious. So these are the two reasons. And inshallah, if we have time, we may talk about a third one. Going on to the first reason, that religion and science contradict each other. When we look at our religion, which is the religion of Islam, our main book is what? The Quran. We see that in the Quran, there is no mention that Allah tells us not to pursue knowledge and not to gain knowledge of the sciences. On the contrary, Allah encourages it and says that in the universe are the signs of Allah, so observe it. We have in the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتُنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. We will show them our signs in the universe and in themselves until it becomes clear that this is the truth. Islam, our religion, calls for the Muslim to observe the universe, to observe the sciences, because in it are the signs of Allah that prove the existence of Allah. So it calls for this. It doesn't tell you to not observe this. It doesn't tell you to not pursue sciences and gain that knowledge. It encourages it. Another verse, in the creation of the heavens and the earth and the alternation of night and day are signs for the people of understanding. إن في خلق السماوات والأرض واختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات. So Islam calls us to observe these things, and you observe them through the sciences, through utilizing scientific knowledge. You observe it, and through your observation, Allah says you will find the signs of Allah. I'll give you an example. We see that one of the most famous arguments that is made against the atheist is what? The teleological argument, or the argument from design. In Arabic, it's called Burhanun Nazm. What's this argument? This argument is that every design has a designer. Every design has a designer. And the universe shows an intricate and complex design. Therefore, the universe must have a designer. There must be a designer for this intricate design, which is the universe. That is one of the most famous arguments that someone who believes in God presents to the atheist. This argument, its base is you observing the universe. You're observing the intricacies, the complexity of the universe, in order for you to even build this argument against the atheist. So it requires that you combine scientific knowledge with religion in order to present this argument. Doesn't contradict science. On the contrary, it uses science to prove its point. It tells you to look at the universe. Look how complex the universe is. Look at the way that the universe works in such detail that even the smallest change within the universe can cause irreparable damage. I'll give you an example. They asked the question. They said, if the earth is rotating, they said if the earth, hypothetically, was to stop rotating for a second, what would happen? If the earth, which is rotating now, was to stop for 1 second, what would happen to the earth? They said it would be the end of the earth. It would be the end of the world as we know it. if the rotation of the earth was to stop for 1 second. Why? They say that the earth rotates at the equivalent of 800 miles per hour due east. The earth rotates at 800 miles per hour due east. So if the earth's rotation stops for 1 second, the earth will stop, but whatever is on top of the earth will continue moving at 800 miles per hour. And that will cause destruction. The buildings will fall over, the oceans will start pushing through and causing tsunamis, the tectonic plates will cause earthquakes. It will be destruction. It is like you driving a car at a certain speed and then stopping abruptly. If you are not wearing a seatbelt, you will fly through at the same speed that you were driving at. That is if the earth was to stop rotating for 1 second. Has that malfunction ever happened in the earth's history? No. How come? You see how detailed it is, how the smallest mistake can cause destruction. This is how we come to the conclusion that there has to be a designer. And that's what the Quran calls for. Ayatuna fil afaq wa fi anfusihim. We will show them our signs in the universe and in themselves. And you look at the human and you observe the human, down from the cardiovascular system to the brain to the DNA. It is the most complex thing. Just look at the brain in of itself. 80 billion neurons. So 80 billion signals in your brain. In this brain, which is a kilogram and a half. 80 million neurons, which are sending messages throughout your entire body at the speed of light. Are you in control of this? Did you even know that this is how your body works? Then who makes it work? That's why Islam invites you to learn the sciences. Because in it is where you will find the signs of Allah Azza wa Jal. And the more you learn from it, the more you will understand that this has to be from a designer. This has to be from a greater being that provided this detail and this intricacy. So there is no contradiction between science and religion. On the contrary, working together, it can be a very powerful thing, a very beneficial thing. That is the answer to the first reason. The second reason that we talked about, which was religion slows scientific progress. That you cannot be a religious man and be a scientific man at the same time. Because religion slows down scientific advancement. It goes against science. It doesn't allow you to advance. I will say this. You look at history. You look at and ask, who are the pioneers of the scientific world? Alaykum as-salam wa rahmatullah. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. You ask, who are the pioneers of the scientific world? Many of them were men who believed in God. Did their belief in God stop them from being pioneers in their field? No. I'll give you two modern examples and one Shi'i example who was a pioneer in his own field of science. The first example in the modern era is Isaac Newton. Isaac Newton is the one who revolutionized our modern understanding of physics. His theories laid the foundation for the modern understanding of physics, of the universe, of gravity. Was Isaac Newton. He invented calculus by himself. One man invented calculus. a mathematical process which is so complex that until now it is being studied. What does Isaac Newton say about his belief in God? He says that in the absence of any other proof, the thumb alone would convince me of God's existence. He says, in the absence of any other proof. Let's say there was no proof of the complexity of the universe and design, and all of this was to go away. Isaac Newton says, my thumb alone would convince me of God's existence. That's one. The second example, and probably the most famous one, Albert Einstein. And everyone knows the theory of relativity. And he's won Nobel Peace Prizes. And everyone knows his innovation in the scientific field. What he says, the more I study science, the more I believe in God. The more I study science, the more I believe in God. The atheists make the claim that science, the more you study science, the further away it will get you from God. But you have the true scientists, those who are pioneers in the field, they'll say, no, it only gets me closer to God. It doesn't get me further away from God. And the third and final example is a man by the name of Jabar ibn Hayyan. This man was the student of Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq. Jabar ibn Hayyan is nicknamed, this is a nickname that the West gave him, the father of chemistry. Jabar ibn Hayyan is nicknamed the father of chemistry. He laid the foundations for many of the sciences of chemistry that is studied today. And even in Latin, they gave him a name. They called him Jabar or Gerber. Because they translated his books into the Latin language and were teaching his books in their universities up until the 17th century. He would create or discover many of the acids that we see today. For example, hydrochloric acid. That was discovered by Jabar ibn Hayyan. You have the different processes, the chemical processes, such as distillation, evaporation, crystallization. It was all thanks to Jabar ibn Hayyan. His experiments is what laid the foundation for these processes to be understood. And you have many, many other contributions that Jabar ibn Hayyan presented to the field of chemistry. And then when they ask Jabar ibn Hayyan, where did you get your knowledge from? Who do you credit your knowledge from? You see that Jabar answers and he says that my knowledge was Ja'far ibn Muhammad al-Sadiq. And he says in his words, Jabar, he says, he is the source of wisdom and light. And it's funny because sometimes people like to say, what has the Shia provided in the advancement of humanity? What has the Shia done? What has the Imams of the Shia provided for modern civilization? What has the Imam, Habibi, done asking about what the Imams provided is too big of a question. Look at the companions, the students of the Imams, and you will see that they have provided enough. But then you cannot help but ask yourself the question, what if they gave the opportunity for the Imams to share their knowledge? What if they allowed them to share this divine knowledge that was given to them by Allah? You have, with all the limitations that they had, and look at some of the contributions that the Imams gave to the modern sciences. But instead, they insisted, based off of their envy, to kill the Ahlul Bayt, to end the Ahlul Bayt. When we read in Dua al-Nudbah, وَالْأُمَّةُ مُصِرَّةٌ عَلَى مَقْتِهِ مُجْتَمِعَةٌ عَلَى قَطِيعَةِ رَحِمِهِ وَإِقْصَاءِ وِلْدِهِ. And the Ummah, the majority, were insistent on having that enmity against Ali ibn Abi Talib and the family of Ali ibn Abi Talib, came together to end the bloodline of Ali ibn Abi Talib. إلا القليل ممن وفى لرعاية الحق فيهم. Except a minority which actually cared and were loyal to the rights of Muhammad wa Ali Muhammad. And of this minority who actually paid their respect and their loyalty to the Ahl al-Bayt, of them was Omul Benni. Omul Benni. And we honor her tonight. She's a very strange character. She embodies what it is to be a Shi'i. To have the Imam of your time as the focus in your life. She is a role model for men and women in this aspect. We learn from her. Look how she put the Imam of her time as the main thing in her life. Nothing was more important than the Imam of her time. And look at the status that she holds today, Omul Benni. Do we do the same with the Imam of our time? Do we put him above everything else? Let's observe that. Let's learn that from Omul Benni. And not only did she have that, she taught this to her children, to her sons. Abu al-Fadl al-Abbas, Ja'far, Uthman, Abdullah. She taught this to them. That nothing is more important than the Imam of your time. And you see that clearly when Imam al-Sajjad and the caravan returned to Medina. Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam stops outside of Medina. He meets with Bishr ibn Hadlam. He tells Bishr, "Oh Bishr, your father used to recite poetry. Do you recite poetry as well?" He told him, "Yes, ya ibn Rasulullah." He told him, "Then go down into Medina and tell the people what happened to Abu Abdullah al-Hussein." So Imam al-Sajjad tells Bishr ibn Hadlam. And then Bishr ibn Hadlam goes down to Al-Madinah and he recites his famous poetry. Ya Ahla Yathrib, la muqama lakum. يا أهل يثرب لا مقام لكم بها قتل الحسين فأدمعي مدرار. O people of Medina, O people of Yathrib, come outside of your houses. There is no place for you to stay. Hussein ibn Ali has been killed and for him my tears shed. What happened, O Jabar? الجسم منه بكربلاء مضرج والرأس منه على القناة يدار. His body is laying on the plains of Karbala and his head is being travelled from city to city. Some people heard Bishr, some people didn't. Everyone came around Bishr ibn Hadlam asking for the news. All of a sudden a woman holding a child comes to Bishr. She asks Bishr, "Oh Bishr, what news do you have of my son al-Hussein?" Bishr ibn Hadlam asks the people, he tells them, "Who is this woman?" They tell him, "This is Benni, the mother of Al-Abbas." Bishr proceeds to tell her about what happened to her sons. He's thinking that perhaps she wants to know what happened to her own sons before Al-Hussein. He tells her, "O Benni, عظم الله لك الأجر. My condolences to you, Benni, for the martyrdom of your son Ja'far, for the martyrdom of your son Uthman, for the martyrdom of your son Abdullah." And with each one, Benni tells him, "O Bishr, I did not ask you about my sons. I asked you about Abu Abdullah al-Hussein." Until Bishr ibn Hadlam tells her, "O Benni, عظم الله لك الأجر بمصاب أبي الفضل العباس." Benni then drops the child that's in her hand. She tells him قطعت نياط قلبي أولادي ومن تحت الخضراء كلهم فداء لأبي عبد الله. She tells him, "Oh Bishr, you have broken my heart into pieces. Everyone, my sons and everyone is a sacrifice for Abu Abdullah. Just tell me what happened to Al-Hussein." And then he tells her, "Oh Omul Benni, my condolences. Abu Abdullah Al-Hussein was killed in Karbala." That is when she called, "Wa walada wa Hussainyat." And this sadness never left Omul Benni up until her last moment. They said that she made graves in Al-Baqi', symbolized graves that she would remember her sons in, and she would recite poetry and cry over this tragedy, and even the people of Medina would join her, where she would read, "La tad'uwanni wayki al-banin تذكريني باليوث العرين." Do not call me al-Banin anymore. You remind me of my sons who were slaughtered in Karbala. كان لي بنون أدعى بهم واليوم أصبحت ولا من بني. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أهل بيت محمد أي منقلب ينقلبون والعاقبة للمتقين. We ask Allah to hasten the reappearance of our Imam صاحب العصر والزمان. اللهم عجل لوليك الفرج والعافية والنصر واجعلنا من أنصاره وأعوانه ومن شيعته ومحبيه وإلى أرواح المؤمنين والمؤمنات. رحم الله من قرأ سورة المباركة الفاتحة مع الصلاة على محمد وآل محمد.